ByuN is going for a very safe opening. Hellion, Cloak, Banshee. It is obviously not something that's new, but it is something that just kind of says like, hey, I actually think I'm fine in this matchup. This is about as safe of a Terran opener as you can go for. You obviously want to get some damage with the Hellions and Banshees, but it's much more important to just have those units out on the map, have a good idea what your opponent is doing, and I mean, you're not really in any danger of dying against anything with this opening, are you?
No, you're not. And Lightshade has been popular in the past for roaches, but I was going to say what we're kind of waiting on is if an armory is included. If it wasn't included, then it is just a very safe play, very helpful against any potential future roaches. With an armory, well, we actually saw Euthermal try this in his TVZ, and unfortunately got kind of like a weak start to it. Let's see how ByuN's going to be able to use this attack and gain an advantage. DRG is getting a very safely timed Baneling Nest, which already bodes well for him, but then it's a matter of having like your queens position as well, right? Not letting things just snowball out of control.
A lot of Spore Crawlers going down too on this side of Dongregu. 4 Spore Crawlers, so basically 1 for each mineral line and then even a safety Spore in between the bases. Seems like DRG is pretty damn certain of what he's going up against. Actually, how did that Banshee already take so much damage? I guess it was a little bit ahead of the party. Hellions morphing into Hellbats as we speak, trying to get on top of these queens. I mean, a couple of drones are going down, but I don't hate this defense initially for Dongregu. He should keep his queens alive though.
Yeah, I should do that. I mean, they did run into like all the queens together. That can be sometimes like a bit of a tricky possibility with this opener. We actually saw Cure do this opener literally 5 times in a row against a Zerg player. And what we learned really, I think it was Solar actually, is that, you know, a lot of the trick of it can be the Banshee gets a surprising amount of damage on drone lines even when Spore Crawlers are there, because the Spore Crawler doesn't actually cover the entire mineral line. So that kind of happened there. A little bit of a distraction as well, so it's possible the queens aren't microed or the drones aren't microed. But overall, it's a hold, and he didn't actually have to make Banelings to do that, which is something we should note. It wasn't the most expensive hold.
I don't think it's just a hold, I think it's a very good hold even. I mean, now we are losing a few more drones at the tail end of all of this. It's obviously nice for ByuN that he was able to keep these Banshees alive, but the fact that Dongregu was playing a relatively greedy game, only ended up losing 5 drones while picking up the majority of the Hellions. I mean, at this point he's going up to 4 bases, while the third is not even really in location yet for ByuN.
Perhaps a developing meta. All the Zergs got together and talked about ZVT as well as ZDP, apparently. Another little scuffle here. The Widow Mines do get tossed out with the Widow Mines, the Banelings, and the Banelings push the Marines back, and ByuN's not really going to find any success over on that left side, which even goes as far as say, like, not much creep was cleaned up. The Banshees on the right side trying to go for a sneaky 5th base cancel, just get destroyed, pushed away, and so far it really seems like DRG is playing the better game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, these are the little things, right? Quite often these Banshees show up, they get a little cancel on that hatchery, and sure, Dongregu will still be able to go up to 5 bases a bit later, but that's kind of how Terrans claw their way back into the game if the early game didn't really work out. Dongregu on top of that too, bringing the queens in position, having the Overseer there to deal with it, and ByuN really needs to start finding some success. Well, Dongregu is looking for a pretty big counterattack. Don't forget that he's got Burrow. He could burrow a couple of Banelings in the mineral line the way that Elaser always does it, but this is decent economic damage regardless, and at the same time he's safe at home, and ByuN is in a bit of trouble.
He's in a lot of trouble. He loses 14 SCVs and then doesn't find any advantage on DRG's side of the map and just pretty much completely loses momentum. That's often the worst thing about those types of engagements. What the Zergs are really looking to do is trip up the Terran and either stop them from attacking or they mess up their attack. They run on creep and into Banelings. DRG playing a fabulous game, continuing to hold on to so much creep spread as well, getting up to that hive. 2-2, only slightly behind ByuN's. But ByuN, I mean, one thing we did learn from him in his comeback earlier, well, not this year, last year I suppose, was that he actually still has some pretty darn good late game TVZ when other Terrans refuse, basically. They're very shy about going into the late game and embracing it. ByuN has been the Terran to do that. So still got some hope here for ByuN, but he knows that his momentum's been completely stopped. DRG still continuing to be so aggressive with this army composition off of creep is still it's dangerous, but it's been working out. And then behind it, you know, of course, going into that hive, he manages to start 3-3 only like 10 seconds behind the Terran's 3-3. That's not a good sign for the Terran. Well, ByuN still has that good army supply. He's built it up. it is looking harder and harder to actually get a win in this game. Even the SCVs going down again to the Banelings. This DRG kind of whiffle waffles between the Marines and the SCVs, decides to go after the SCVs into the natural, where there are some Widow Mines. Maybe not the best use of that whole Baneling clump for 11 SCVs, right? But DRG kind of has some wiggle room.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing for DongRegu is that all this action is taking place in the natural of ByuN. So even if ByuN cleans it up, it's not like he can just move all of his units to the other side of the map. That's gonna take a little while, and by the time that he would actually be there, obviously the first ultras are gonna get out. We have a burrowed Baneling that unburrows, and look at that one Zergling going on a little bit of a killing spree here. 6 more SCVs bite the dust. And it's just a matter of time before we get more Vipers and Ultras. ByuN still hanging in there. The supply is not looking all that bad. Economically, it's looking a little bit worse. I'm mostly just worried about these Ultras and Vipers. Those are going to be very difficult to deal with just Marines and Marauders.
Absolutely. It's a whole nother part of the army, making it a bit more complex. ByuN also might be kind of surprised to see it. You know, the Vipers specifically, that is. Obviously, Ultras are going to be on the docket for any TVZ. But this quadruple drop up to the top north, ByuN finally, like, I'm sick and tired of you trying to defend with only a limited number of Lings and Banelings. I'm going to really commit to this. Might actually find some room here. He showed this exact type of play against, you know, the really epic series versus Sterile, right? Where he was able to control 2 large bio-based armies before, and he's going to try that again, but also being attacked on his 3rd base. Has to lift the command center in case the Banelings pop that. A very good Widow Mine hit, at least to clean it up. And ByuN goes right back to trying to use his offensive reinforcements.
The first Ultras are on the way, but it's going to take a little while before they're actually out. Maybe after DongRegu just lost all these Zerglings and Banelings, there is potential for ByuN to do something with that army on the top right side, but plenty of Zerg units left behind at home. DongRegu smells blood, wants to keep on pushing. There's no need for him to really get disadventurous. He's still the one with the better economy. I love the random parasitic bomb, just to soften up these medevacs a little bit. You may not kill these medevacs, but this is still annoying. If you're ByuN, you want to micro Marines and Marauders. You don't want to deal with your medevac micro, and it just feels that the swarm is never ending at this point. DongRegu is relentless in game 1.
Exactly. I mean, as I said, that Viper probably even a little bit of a surprise, like, oh, I actually got a Viper, you know? So now I have to micro yet another thing on top of making sure that my medevacs unload, my bio is split, and my Marauders are on the front line. So that's a lot to do. That income advantage graph not making this look like a very pretty game for Ben. It absolutely is not, but DRG having the time of his life, feeling very confident, still has all the creep spread. I feel like I haven't seen a creep swimmer die in the last, like, 10 minutes even, on very good upgrades, and it kind of feels like the world is his oyster, whereas for ByuN, he's just hoping that he gets 1, then 2, then maybe even 3 great engagements. That's kind of, he's kind of hoping for DRG to mess up.
But so far it looks beautiful what DongRegu is displaying.
That's exactly what I was getting at. You know, if DRG keeps thinking that I can take fights willy-nilly because I'm in such control, and then he takes 2, 3 kind of mediocre fights or very bad fights, then suddenly he's without cash, he's without creep spread, and it's on a short map where, like, the momentum swings really harshly. So he's still got to keep that in mind. You know, you never really truly feel comfortable unless you have, like, a 5,000 bank, I suppose. But he should still be feeling pretty good. He is going to take this engagement, but it is somewhat off of creep, and that Marauder count is quite intimidating to those Ultras.
Yep, I mean, the army supply of ByuN is actually quite a bit bigger. He's got 30 more army supply to work with at this point. Finally found a little bit of economic damage in the top right. And the Queen spent a lot of energy trying to keep this hatchery alive. It seems like the hatch will still go down unless these Ultras have something to say about it, and they do. I mean, this is kind of it. The Fungals do connect with a couple of these bio units. Baneling started to roll in. DongRegu needs to be careful. Time is definitely on his side. He just needs to have one more proper cleanup.
Exactly. The Fungals looking to do that, but he's out of them for now. Easy parasitic bomb to dodge out of that time, as ByuN was retreating anyways. He's actually going to retreat and try and defend this 5th. It makes a lot of sense to take this 5th. He's going to be able to defend and attack from this point. And DRG already lost 1 base up here. If he lost another one, then we would be a little bit scared about his economic situation. Never really accrued that much of a bank for minerals, and would be starting to mine out of his main and natural, right? But that's a little bit farther in the future. ByuN still has a lot of work to do. Still has to take a good engagement against Ultra, Viper, and Fester. There's a lot of possibilities there.
It seems very difficult, but we know if there's a Terran out there that's capable of it, it has to be ByuN. DongRegu getting a little adventurous here at the edge of creep, kind of going off creep, and it's obviously very intimidating for him to run too deep into too many Widow Mines, because the Banelings are very important for him at this point. You mentioned the mineral bank. It's pretty much non-existent for DongRegu. He's got the better army, but he still needs to take the better fight.
He's waiting for that one good fungal, right? But otherwise, letting the bio army just kite back off of creep is not going to go super well for DRG. As we can see here, ByuN totally on top of getting that concave already preset, so pulling individual sections of the Terran army back is easy enough for him to do. Once again, going to happen here. Some Banelings do collide thanks to a couple of fungals, and the Vipers come in. It looks like they're not really going to find a whole lot to do, as just the ground army's not really there anymore for DRG. Does have some ultras on a planetary, which are going to get the kill, but aren't supporting the defense in the top right.
This is turning into a really sick game. The kind of stuff we want to see from these two great Starcraft players in the first round of the lower bracket. Somehow we got there. Dongregu finding some very important economic damage, taking out that base at 9 o'clock. But hey, ByuN also getting a couple of good fights in the center. The work account for ByuN is getting lower and lower. At this point, he's actually supply blocked. He's lost so many depots, and obviously losing the planetary adds up too. He still has the bigger army. He's got a 40 army supply advantage, but can he do something with it?
That's always the question, it feels like, towards these late game TVCs. It's like, well, a Terran has 40 more supply, but then they have to get across so much creep spread, they have to kill so many bases, and there's always the chance that the spellcasters come in strong for the Zerg player. That is a decent amount of Widow Mines, but starting to get cleaned up thanks to a couple of Banelings. DRG actually trying to expand to the bottom left is something that ByuN definitely has to stop, so very good of him to have a little drop force to the left.
I'm definitely a big fan of the infestors, especially when you have this much gas in the bank. I think just having the ability to land a couple of fungals and let your Banelings connect with, obviously, ideally Marines, but even Marauders, as long as they're clumped up and fungled, the Banelings start doing all right against them. It's mostly the Widow Mines, I think, that's what's really preventing Dongregu from winning the first game, as he gets another good little fight in the bottom left. ByuN trying to retake the base at 9 o'clock. Overseer is being sent forward, trying to draw the Widow Mine fire, and actually being pretty successful in doing so. Seems like Dongregu is breaking through a little bit, but it's hard to keep going off creep.
I think that might have been just a mistake. ByuN was looking to the left, so his army got dragged in AI. To the other army, that was not on purpose to do that, but that's ByuN's really having his multitasking tested. I don't think he was paying attention to the force that was picked off at 9 o'clock, and then he wasn't paying attention to this. Now full attention back on here, but that could be temporary. He just put an orbital over on the 9 o'clock, which means that Lings going by will definitely devastate it, and then again, distract him as well. So it's if ByuN could just have a fully safe base in the bottom left, a brand new base with a planetary with both the upgrades, and he could focus entirely on his micro. That's difficult to do now, and actually DRG just figures that he can end this. He's going across to ByuN's side of the map, looking to kill not just the base, but perhaps ByuN himself. Parasitic bombs being thrown down, fungals being thrown down. A very good concave for the Terran, gives the Terran a little bit of hope, but actually it turns around, starting to chase after those infestors and those ultras.
What a great hold by ByuN. Obviously doesn't mean all of a sudden he's winning this game, but he's getting some very big pickoffs. Something even blew off a couple of Banelings there. I'm not exactly sure what happened on the right side. Let's not forget that's still an orbital on the left, so it's very vulnerable for those Zerglings you just mentioned. I mean, both players is making some fantastic moves, but Dongregu, the one who's been mining so much more than his opponent throughout the entirety of this game, no minerals left in the bank, just lost the majority of his expensive units, and his most important base, well, it's right next to the most important base of ByuN, but ByuN's army is right here. I don't know how he does it, but this Terran just never dies.
I mean, I really want to give a lot of kudos to ByuN, absolutely, about responding as quick as he did, but DRG also was probably just getting too eager, He kept thinking, oh, I'm doing a good job, okay, I'm pretty safe on the bases, but when you really look at how much economy he has going for him, how much bank he had for him, it wasn't that impressive, and all of a sudden losing a base is now really important for DRG. He's going to look for some revenge, though, and gets the planetary to the top right. That was the base that ByuN was supposed to not have to worry about for some time, and now it's gone. At least he takes down a couple of units on it, and ByuN still has, guys, a 70 army supply lead at this point. How did that happen? It has, and that means that the overall supply is incredibly deceiving.
I actually wonder if ByuN knows how close this game is, or that he's even winning it at this point, because it's gotta feel desperate when you're losing all your SUVs, when you're losing a base, you only have 25 SUVs left, and you see Zerg units, but these are pretty much the only Zerg units that are out there. GG gets called, and ByuN, despite...